Hello, in this video we're going to discuss Medicine Part 6, Soul Material. So this is an area of science that people don't know of on Earth, so I'm just going to share it with you. Firstly, we'll look at how a soul is created, which is vastly different to what anyone knows. So we'll go into it with a bit of detail, briefly, so that people can get a grasp of what's involved with the anatomy of the body and the soul chassis. So in heaven we refer to it as a chassis, the soul chassis. So when God was created, He was created in a chamber that was naturally formed by a collision of wormhole element and gravity element. So a fragment of gravity element pulled asteroids of wormhole element together, which created a reaction where it created another dimension and also created a naturally formed sphere-shaped chamber. And what happened then was the fragment of gravity element touched the inside of the chamber, and a wormhole appeared and created air. So it filled the chamber up with air. It was originally vacuum, and then when it was full of air, the wormhole vanished that created it. So it's to do with wormhole science, which is another topic. Then what happened was the gravity element fragment brushed the inside of the chamber, and this created a wormhole that emits soul material. So wormholes can emit material with the right amount of gravity. That's how you influence wormhole element. It emits mana, and in this case a kind of mana that is soul material. So the process that happened with God, which is male, which is on the right, the wormhole emitted soul material that's like a kind of string, and it knitted together and worked in a clockwise direction, knitting together the soul material. Once it had completed the form of God's soul, it had encased the fragment of gravity element inside God's skull. Then what happened was, once the soul chassis is created, it then goes through a second process where the wormhole emits another form of mana that fills the body. So the soul is a template to the body, and so in soul form life exists, and then the soul is filled with more mana. It goes bright orange, and then a person is created, or a creature is created. So creatures are created the same way. All life is created like this. So the soul was filled with the body, then the wormhole vanished because the process was complete. So when God creates another person, He reaches inside the chamber through a wormhole, touches the inside wall at a specific location, and He increases happiness, which is gravity emitted through his finger, through his palm, and then a black ball appears, a tiny one, that emits soul material that knits together, that creates a soul. So with humankind, they're the same as angels when angels were created. created exactly the same way in a chamber in batches of 5,000. And the first person created from human batch, she stepped out of the chamber and her first words were human. And so that's where we get the word human from. So human batch were in heaven, and it was getting, God had created another planet called Planet 1 in the very first history, and so God brought human batch to Earth. In the presence of gravity, so when God was created, it was in zero gravity. So his Soul Chasis is just over 4 feet tall. And so God, Jesus, and their descendants are slightly different from angels and humankind, in that they have a gravity crystal inside their skull, which allows them to emit a tiny bit of gravity from their palms. So for God to create stars and planets, he was trapped inside this wormhole element chamber. Outside was vacuum. God touched the side of the wall at a different place, and a wormhole appeared with its exit point outside, and in soul form God was able to go outside. If he went outside in his body, he would die in vacuum. So what he found was that he would be inside that chamber. He would die of asphyxiation, and then in soul form touch the side of the chamber at a different location, which created a wormhole that went outside, and God was able to go outside and explore. There's a few asteroids out there in the dimension where he was, and he was able to make a rod out of wormhole element, and from that's how he created stars, planets, and moons. So with soul material, the weight is 0.0005 of a gram. A person can still talk in soul form. You can still walk in soul form, but a gust of wind will blow you away. And God and Jesus and their descendants, you would notice in soul form a glowing green crystal, which you could just see. So it's a translucent material that looks stringy and it's difficult to see. So I'm not talking ghosts, we're talking soul material. So if a person died in heaven, in the early days, this is before we had the technology that we've got today in heaven, the person's body would be carried to a chamber that was made of wormhole element. God would use a wormhole that would go from the outside of the sphere to the inside, and then the body would be placed inside. Often we'd just throw them in, and then God would reach in, touch the inside of the wall, and then back away from it and turn off the wormhole that allowed him to look inside, and then the process would refill the soul with a new body. It would take 8 seconds. So creation of a soul takes 8 hours for a person, and refilling of a soul takes 8 seconds. So it's something about souls people don't know about, and it is mentioned in some books. A book in the beginning, which I've written, mentions it in more detail. It's literally in the environment where the angels lived in the first history. It was like Ireland during winter. So death did happen often from the cold and from other things. When people died, they were taken to the chamber and had their soul refilled. a soul can be killed. Okay, so it's a delicate material, and it can be cut, and the soul can die. An amputation of a soul person lasts about 4 hours, and then the soul dies, and the soul material breaks down and dissipates and falls to pieces, and that's the end of them. Soul can also die from soul decay, so it has a half-life that I know, but I haven't worked out how long it lasts. But I can tell you that over time a soul will die. It won't last 4 trillion years, and then the soul dies. So with soul decay, the soul chassis shrinks, becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, and then withers and dies. And so that's the important thing for people to know about eternal life. It's not a bad thing to live for all eternity, as long as you live in a good, comfortable, happy environment. And that's what heaven is. It's a very, very exciting and good place. There's a lot of myths about heaven. There is sex in heaven. There is alcohol in heaven. There's no drugs in heaven. And people live good lives there. People and angels and sentient kind live good lives in heaven. So it's a bit about soul material. But the question would be on a doctor or nurse's mind, where is your soul? I can tell you, your soul is protected in another dimension. And we'll get to that in another video. I am the Archangel Daniel, and I'm from heaven.